When you think of good towers in TDS, what do you think of? Accelerator, golden minigunner, turret? Well, yes, these are all good towers and capable of some amazing amounts of DPS and can delete some of the strongest bosses in TDS history. They are just so expensive and take so long to get. Like, if you want golden minigunner, you first have to get regular minigunner, then grind like 50,000 coins to get a golden crate, to then have to gamble on getting it or getting something like golden cowboy. Accelerator is even worse, as it requires gems, a whole different currency that you can only get by beating hidden wave, frost mode, or hardcore, with hardcore giving you the most amount of gems, it being 250, with accelerator costing 2,500 gems, and hardcore taking about an hour to complete. You're looking about 5 hours of grinding the same thing over and over and over again. And yes, that is still true today, as these guys still have some of the highest DPS numbers in the game. However, more recently, some towers have been getting the spotlight for being really overpowered towers, really OP towers, that you wouldn't really expect to be as powerful as they are, because they're in the more cheaper sections, so people would naturally not see them as good as the more expensive ones. I've seen plenty of YouTubers talk about them, like Elite, Corso, Propellers, Jordan State, but I've also had a first-hand experience of these towers when attempting to my cheapest loadout videos. So I feel like I should just make a video, a little one, that just shines a light on these 4 towers that on paper are just beginner towers, something people really start out with and never use again for more expensive towers, yet they can actually do tons of damage and help you win some of this game's hardest modes. If you want to see more videos like this from me, make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below. Towers that you believe are also very underrated and I didn't mention in this video. Make sure to join my Discord server, as I might be hosting some small event there where you can win Robux. I don't know yet, I'm working on it, but still join and engage with the community. But with all that out of the way, time to cover these goats. So I'm remaking the Militant section to A, talk about the rebalance modes, then a quick yap about the Militant. First, the modes. And to put it bluntly, TDS just buffed all its modes and nerfed and edited a bunch of towers in the game, or just made them super expensive. It's a mess right now and definitely requires a video of its own. Now the Militant. Instead of just scrapping a whole section and remaking it, I'm just gonna cut out the part where I say it can solo multi-mode. As with the new rebalances, it can't anymore. But it still got pretty far, so with some help, it could still solo it pretty easily. And everything else I said in this section is still fairly accurate, and I see no reason to delete it and just take longer on a video that's almost already done. So I'm just leaving it in. Everything else in this video is still pretty normal, as all the other towers in it haven't really been touched by the devs, so the only new part's gonna be this. The footage in the background is gonna be a little outdated, but nothing you can do about it. But with all that being said, back to the video. I'm gonna be covering these units in order from what they're ranked as. So I'm starting in starter, then intermediate, and so on. The first tower, and only tower in the starter section, is the Militant. Just amazing for DPS in general, and a cheap way for you to get some hidden and flying detection. He's really great on Fallen and Frost modes for extra DPS, and he's an amazing hardcore early game tower, as he gets his flying detection on level 1 and is relatively cheap for hardcore's more expensive prices. He's less of a diet minigunner, which I've referred to him in the past a bunch of times, and more of a younger brother. He can do a lot of DPS, shoots automatically, but he can also shoot flying enemies, which minigunner can't do unless you have an AUV or the firework technician. But the minigunner has more DPS, obviously, as he's more expensive. But yeah, for a tower that only costs 500 coins, he can be very useful in multiple different game modes and can perform pretty well. He just gets outscaled by higher health enemies. Probably one of the best splash damage towers in the game, despite only costing 2,500 coins, and being an intermediate tower, this guy can do some insane amounts of damage, mostly due to his max level, which grants him quad missiles. Technically, each of these are their own projectiles, each doing 85 damage, and since there's 4 of them, if all 4 hit one unit, that's 340 damage on a single enemy. You can get 8 Rocketeers, so that would be a total of 2,720 damage that can not only hit one single enemy, but can also spread across multiple enemies. It's very common and very satisfying to watch hordes of enemies get erased from the face of the earth. He's just a really good tower for most game modes. I haven't seen him recently used in hardcore, but is still useful almost in all of survival, mostly due to his placement limit and lack of flying detection, but his missiles can still splash onto them if they're flying above ground enemies. I like him personally, and he shined the most when I was looking for towers to beat all the game modes as cheap as possible, so I definitely recommend bringing him along. First, To really get the most DPS out of these guys, you want them to be as compact as possible. So all their cannons and machine gun fire can all stack onto enemies and their DPS from the units aren't all spread out. It's not too hard to do. You can only get 5 of them and each of them costs $400 to place down. So if you just save up $2,000 and place them all together down really quickly, then boom, they're packed together. If you want them to use them as a starter tower, however, just time the placements with their timers. So the second the timer hits 0, this little circle thing with the Roblox face on it, place one down as quickly as possible to keep them as close as possible. And with some careful timing, boom, you got yourself a nice compact group of jeeps, tanks, or whatever the hell you got. And that can basically solo most game modes until you need flying detection, extra DPS for the extremely high health enemies that your tanks can't run over because they're like too tanky, or they would get in the way of doing actual DPS to more important enemies. The amount of splash damage and DPS they can do, along with the amount of ran damage they can do stacked together, and you can do some nasty damage to bosses, all for just 4,000 coins. Now I was debating whether I should just end it here or cover this guy, as I haven't personally seen Trapper used in many game modes recently, and I haven't really seen anybody talking about him recently. However, thinking back on it, when I last used it, looking at its stats on the wiki, and then trying it out for myself, this guy is actually cracked. For 3,000 coins, this guy was just straight up bullying Molten mode. It wasn't like just the beginning enemies and some of the bosses. This thing got to wave 27 on its own with no help or support. This could be an easy solo Molten if you just bring a few extra towers, as even though these two got through, they barely got through. As if there was just a little extra damage, they wouldn't have made it. And I was genuinely impressed with its performance. Its spike traps at max level can do 600 damage, and if an enemy has more health in the trap, it won't destroy it, it'll just walk over it, taking the 600 damage, and then running into the next trap that can either do 600 damage, or if you're lower level, it'll do whatever damage it's at, but it also won't destroy that, it'll stack up and it'll die. It's really cool how that works. And then any weaker enemies behind it will just run into the 600 damage and immediately get killed by it. He has landmines that do 140 damage with pretty good AoE and can do burn damage. It basically deletes swarms, so if you have a huge compact of people going over the spike trap and you don't want your spike traps to be completely destroyed by a horde, just put down a few landmines and they'll deal with them. Then there's the bear trap. It basically stuns enemies as it's meant to clamp down on their legs and keep them in place. And while when I was testing it out, it didn't work most of the time, when it does work, enemies are stunned for 3 whole seconds, which is crazy. I remember once using this tower in a trio hardcore match, and it performed pretty well for the early game, able to deal with most of the enemies and mopping up stuff like the invisibles and basically everything, until like the higher health enemies came out. But at the end of the day, this tower is meant to be more of a damage booster and pseudo support tower rather than main damage. It's really good for dealing that extra damage and can easily help you win a match, but can it be your main damage for a mode? Not really, as the traps can only last for so long before they have to rebuild up the wall. But other than that, Trapper is a really underrated and powerful tower that you don't normally see, yet can do a lot of work if it's used properly. All these towers I mentioned are amazing towers. They aren't the best towers in the game, I'm not saying that, because Rocketeers or military bases will never reach the DPS outputs like accelerators or engineers can, but still, if you bring these towers along in loadouts, you'll see them do some impressive damage and get you through most of the modes. And the game will also feel more interesting as you won't be using the same towers over and over and over again, which I feel is something that really makes people get bored of this game, the repetition of using the same thing over and over again. So now you know about other towers that are also pretty good, bring them into loadouts, play with them, see how they work, and get impressed by their results, and have fun. Until you lose to some bullshit ass spam, you get mad and rage quit and never play TDS for 5 days. But with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and join the Discord server. Planning on hosting an event, I already said that. And with that, I hope you have an amazing, wonderful day, and I'll see you in another one. Bye!